In this video, I've put together all the facts that point to Chapter 5 being the grand finale of Poppy Playtime's long-running story. We're also going to talk a bit about the issues the devs ran into when dropping Chapter 4, and what needs to be done to make sure that doesn't happen again with Chapter 5. And of course, we'll break down the possible release date for the final chapter. If you want to help the channel grow even more, just let this video play in the background while you're falling asleep, out for a walk, or just doing your thing. Alright, let's get into it. Based on Zach's latest words, we now officially know that the new chapter is definitely happening and seems to be in development. In this video, we'll break down everything hinting at this, and honestly, if it doesn't happen, Poppy's incredible legacy in the gaming industry could take a serious hit. We'll talk about that too. Chapter 4 has been dropping hints left and right about the story coming to an end. Let's start with the most obvious one. Everyone knows that the prototype is the main antagonist and the ultimate evil of Playtime Co. Oh, and by the way, there was a bit of drama on my channel recently. If you're out of the loop, here are 3 steps. Watch this video, read the comments, then check out my post in the community tab. Honestly, I appreciate all the feedback, but let's get back to the main topic. Starting from Chapter 2, the devs have been slowly preparing us for the prototype's reveal. Then, in Chapter 3, even more details pointed in that direction. But what stuck with me the most were Poppy's words.
They killed everyone. The guilty, the innocent, didn't matter. All that death didn't fix anything. Prototype has to die. For this. For everything.
Many people expected to see the prototype in Chapter 4, and videos on this topic racked up millions of views. To be honest, I was convinced it would happen too, but Chapter 4 didn't reveal much about him, aside from his silhouette. However, we did uncover a ton of other crucial information, not just about the prototype, but about Playtime Co. as a whole. Throughout Chapters 3 and 4, Mob Entertainment has been slowly preparing us for this long-awaited encounter, and with every hour of gameplay, we learned more and more. Based on the latest news regarding the prototype, we absolutely have to talk about Poppy as well. It's no secret that Poppy is our main ally. In Chapter 3, we started interacting with her more as she began revealing the history of Playtime Co. By Chapter 4, our encounters became even more frequent, and the build-up to the story's major events intensified. Now let's do a quick interactive segment. How do you think Poppy Playtime should end? Personally, I think it's pretty obvious. We don't need to dig too deep for answers. As Poppy has said many times, our main goal is to rescue the orphans and destroy Playtime Co., along with the prototype. And based on everything I've said so far, and what I'm about to say, Chapter 5 seems like the perfect place for that to happen. In Chapter 4, during our first truly serious conversation with Poppy, there's one incredibly important detail that practically screams that Chapter 5 will be the grand finale of our long journey.
The orphans weren't killed during the hour of joy. They were taken. They're below, in the labs. The prototype's home. They are alive, but sleeping. They're with him. And he knows we're here. So, if we're going to free them and stop the prototype, we need to plan for both at the same time.
Yes. You heard that right. It's not really about the plan or the orphans. Of course, the real attention grabber was the mention of the prototype's home, some kind of laboratories. Well, not just some labs. The prototype's main habitat is none other than the infamous Playtime Co. labs, where Harley Sawyer and the other scientists conducted their horrific experiments on both orphans and employees. Now, let's take a moment for a brief VHS tape segment. Listen closely and try to answer this question. Why did the prototype choose these curse labs as its hideout?
Tell them you're lost. They'll be glad to help. All right. Let's be honest. You're not supposed to be here. This is the single most high security, high clearance section of the whole factory. When someone finds you down here, you will be shot. And before you get any ideas, don't think you can just sneak away either. No, the second you put this tape in, it set off an alarm. So if anyone's home, they know exactly where you are. Pretty nifty, huh? Security is very important to us here. If I were you, I'd start running.
The answer is pretty obvious. First, as Leith Pierre himself said, this location is the most secure area within Playtime Co. And we need to understand that secure doesn't just mean heavy security. It includes traps, codes, massive doors, and countless other defenses. Second, the laboratories are the perfect place to conduct experiments. And who knows? Maybe the prototype has been secretly creating a monstrous abomination all this time, one capable of wiping out not just us and our allies, but humanity as a whole. After Hour of Joy, we know exactly how it feels about humans after all the experiments performed by the scientists. Alright, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. At this point, I'm 1,000,000% convinced that the laboratories will be the main setting of Chapter 5. And if we take into account Poppy's plan, one that involves confronting the prototype, then the chances of finally encountering it in Chapter 5 are absolutely, insanely, unimaginably high. We'll get back to Poppy and the prototype later since they're the biggest keys to answering the main question of this video. But for now, let's talk about Huggy, who has officially made his return. We all remember that Huggy was supposed to die at the end of Chapter 1, and even more than that, everyone knows that Huggy is the face of Poppy Playtime. This whole story started with him, and come on, wouldn't it be insanely cool and symbolic if it ended with him too? For some reason, I'm convinced that Mob Entertainment planned it that way from the very beginning. And just like that, you've got another reason why Chapter 5 is shaping up to be the grand finale of Poppy Playtime. Also, it's no secret that Huggy is one of the prototype's minions. His return could be yet another sign that the biggest mystery of Playtime Co. is finally going to be revealed in Chapter 5. But now, let's circle back to Poppy and the prototype, so I can fully convince you that I'm right about all of this. First, let's recall what Poppy said about how she felt after Hour of Joy.
I thought we were gonna leave. Leave the factory. Not this. All those people. Prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever. I hate him. I hate him, and I hate this place, and I hate that he's right. He explained everything, and he's right. We can't leave. It's too risky. What they did to us, we can't ever let it happen to us or anyone ever again. Doesn't make me feel better about the bodies, though. What he was saying about them. I know there's not really another option. The toys will starve otherwise. They'll die. But it's still disgusting.
So that's how we found out why Poppy's got such a hardcore grudge against the prototype. And at the same time, we got even deeper into the whole Playtime Co. backstory. But one of the most crucial moments in Chapter 4, no doubt, it's that convo between the prototype and Poppy, where we picked up a ton of new details.
This entire time, you've lied to me!
Only because you've kept missing the point. I admit, though, I'm disappointed. After all that time in your case, I'd hoped you'd see things differently. Don't you understand? It's always been about you and we'll all be what we are. That's not a truth that can be brought away. It's time to come home.
I can't go back in the case. I can't.
And of course, Poppy's escape and the total breakdown between us and the prototype was just the cherry on top of this madness. What can I say? The whole of Chapter 4 was setting us up for that big showdown with the prototype in Chapter 5, and that scene, it basically put a giant exclamation mark on that theory. That means all the remaining questions, which honestly aren't that many, will finally get answered in Chapter 5. And if we trace the red thread through this whole video, it's pretty damn clear Chapter 5 is gonna wrap up the Poppy Playtime story. Chapter 4 turned out crazy interesting, but yeah, definitely not perfect, and there are a ton of reasons for that. If you check out Steam reviews without actually playing the game, you might think Chapter 4 was a total disaster. And honestly, just a little bit, that's kind of true. Even though the storyline was spot on, especially with all the new lore we got in Chapter 4, the gameplay, man, it was a total mess. The first chapter dropped on October 12th, 2021, and that was an explosion. Literally, every YouTube channel was making videos on it, even though the whole playthrough took like 25 minutes max. Then, a year and a half later, we got Chapter 2, and another year and a half after that, boom, Chapter 3, which, according to many, was the most hype one so far. If you look at the pattern, every new chapter dropped a year and a half after the last one. But for some reason, they decided to push out Chapter 4 in just 1 year. And yeah, that was mistake number 1, the one that wrecked its ratings. If you played it, or even just watched it on YouTube, you probably get what I mean. Chapter 4 is clearly setting us up for something huge. And let's be real, it's the lore that saved this game from completely sinking and being the worst chapter ever. Come on, you gotta admit, we learned way more in this chapter than in all the previous ones combined. Most players were complaining about the insane amount of bugs, glitches, and just straight up broken mechanics that made it hard to really enjoy the game. If you're curious, there are tons of videos on YouTube showing all that stuff in action. And yeah, the reason for all this? Straight up lack of development time. Mob Entertainment just didn't spend enough time polishing it, and you can totally see that in the player reviews. I swear, I don't get their logic. Why the hell did they give themselves such an unrealistic deadline? Why release a half-baked game? Did they seriously not realize this was gonna backfire? So many questions, and in this video, I'm gonna break it all down. Another major issue is the whole concept of this new chapter. Mob straight up decided to focus entirely on the story, diving deep into Playtime Co's past, fleshing out the main characters. So when it came to actually working on the core gameplay, there just wasn't much time left. And you gotta understand, Mob Entertainment ain't that small indie company you first heard about anymore. They're a full-blown brand now, raking in some serious cash. And like any company that wants to go big, they gotta expand. But here's the thing. Poppy Playtime already has 4 chapters, and let's be real, it's obvious we're heading toward that one final game that's gonna wrap up this whole long and crazy journey. Mob knows this, and I'm more than sure they got a planned release schedule for their games. Something tells me they're already working on another game right now, and to keep everything on track, they probably set themselves this insane deadline for Chapter 4. But hey, that's just my theory. I also feel like Chapter 5 is going to be the final chapter, and that alone might have played a big role in all this. What if Mob kind of sacrificed Chapter 4 to make sure Chapter 5 turns out absolutely flawless? Like end Poppy Playtime on the highest note possible? What do you think about that? Looking back at Chapter 4, we gotta talk about the absolute disaster with the characters. All the new ones, except for Doughy, ended up being super weird and honestly kinda pointless from a gameplay perspective. Like Dr. Sawyer, he's supposed to be a key figure in the Playtime Co. lore, super important to the story, and with all the hype around him before the release, I was sure this computer-headed dude was gonna give us some serious trouble. But nah, he was just there, said a few lines, and then died. That's it. Yarnaby? Man, all I remember is him running around, and let's not forget He was tied to the biggest glitch in the new chapter. You get what I mean? Nightmare Critters and Pianosaurus? Don't even get me started. These guys weren't even in the original story. They were just thrown in there for no real reason. Just to have them, I guess. And while we didn't expect much from the critters, Pianosaurus? Bruh. I'll just keep quiet on that one. I still don't get why they added him either. Like, seriously, it feels like they just decided to mess with him for no reason. And yeah, like a lot of people pointed out, his teaser was literally longer than his actual time in the game. It's pretty clear now, if Sawyer and Yarnaby were supposed to be important for the story, but didn't get their backstory fleshed out, then the Nightmare Critters and Pianosaurus were just there to fill the gameplay gaps. I gotta say, I'm still happy with the game. I really like the story, but hey, that's just my opinion. There were also some super negative reviews though. This chapter drops any pretext that the developers even bothered making any half-decent gameplay. What little you actually get to do is an obvious attempt pad out playtime, so you can't refund the game under 2 hours. Not to mention the countless bugs, glitches, and straight up missing textures several patches in. This slop is strictly YouTuber bait that isn't designed to be played, just spread around to trick people out of their money. A genuine waste of time that nobody should have to pay for. Honestly, I think some of those reviews were way too emotional, and let's be real, not entirely accurate. Sure, Mob didn't perfect the game, and there's no way it should have been released in that state, but even with the bugs, there weren't that many of them, and they weren't big enough to trash the game and call it a cash grab. We still got an insane experience and some seriously cool lore, so those kinds of statements definitely need to be thought through. That being said, even though I'm defending Mob Entertainment here, releasing Chapter 4 this early was definitely a mistake. If they had dropped it like around April or May, that would have been perfect.